Welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
When I was reading Richard Branson's book, Losing My Virginity, it is his autobiography talking about his building of the Virgin brand in England. Great book. I think it's a fantastic book. He's got this story in there where he was in the process of trying to break records in air ballooning. So he was in this air balloon in the sky, trying to go clear around the world in an air balloon. And the story starts out kind of him having trouble. He's realizing this journey isn't going well. And it looks like he's going to crash. I think it's in the Irish Sea, north of Ireland. And it's way before he should be crashing anywhere, really. It's going to be in the ocean. And he's got this story. I think he was with somebody who jumped out already into the sea to save himself. And Richard Branson stayed in the balloon to ride it out. And he quickly realized, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to die here. So he gets out notepads of paper and starts writing notes and letters to his family, his wife and his children, closing up his life, basically being like, hey, so, great life. Here's what I want to tell you is the last words I'm going to tell you. And he said in the middle of him writing those things out, he stopped for a moment and he said, wait a second, I'm not dead yet. Like maybe there's a way out of the situation. Maybe I'm not going to die in the situation. I have some control. I'm still alive. I have some influence over what's happening to me. I don't have to just give up. So he put all the notepads away and he gets himself out of the situation. He eventually crashes into the ocean. Someone's got to come and save him. But he basically saves his life. He navigates to a space where he doesn't die. And it was this spark in him that shifted from kind of giving up and just surrendering to inevitable death to where he shifted and said, wait a second, I still have life in me. I'm not going to give up until I absolutely have to give up. I'm not going to prematurely give up. And he had this moment, this spark of life and decision and influence and attention, I believe, that saved his life. I think it was an attitude, not just a logistic framework that he came with, not just like doing things to help save his life. He actually had an attitude of wanting to survive. So that leads us into what we want to talk about today, which is the fifth and final tool from the book, The Tools, written by Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels. Great book. Go get it if you haven't yet. We've been doing this series. We've done 4 episodes up till now. This is our 5th episode, final one, talking about these 5 tools in the book. Today, we're going to talk about a tool that when you are at your low point, when you feel like giving in or throwing in the towel, or when you just want to relax and take your foot off the gas and just kind of coast through life, how do you find that spark, that energy that just cuts through it all and puts you back on the pathway of life, of success, of doing the things you want to do in this life you've been given?
The name of this tool is called Jeopardy, and the higher force that it pulls on is the force of willpower. Now, this is a different tool than the previous 4. The previous 4 are gifts, basically gifts from the universe that you can pull on. But Jeopardy requires something from us. The reason why they put this chapter in is effectively because we as humans don't like this idea of maintenance. We like to believe that we are fully formed and complete, and we don't really have to do anything to better our lives or situation very often. We feel like things happen to us and there's not really much more we can do unless things are going bad, and then maybe we can make some tweaks. But these things are considered magic pills or silver bullets in our minds oftentimes. But the challenge is that if we're going to make changes in our life, the ones that really affect our life in a tenable way, sustainably, that means that we have to apply maintenance to them. That means that we have to do things that implement things like the tools in our life on a regular basis. It's not a one and done. It's not a fantasy of some system we set up that runs itself. We are not a flat screen TV that we plug in and works until all of a sudden it stops. We're more like a TV that has a faulty connection. And every day the connection separates and we have to go fix it again. And things like the tools are ways for us to make those connections give us a capacity to work on a regular basis. So we're more like faulty TVs as opposed to fully formed ones. We have these connections that are challenges. The thing that Jeopardy does is it reminds us, it gives us clarity and intent, and reminds us that we need to be doing maintenance with these tools all the time. As humans, we're looking for something that exonerates us. In the book, they mention this word exoneration not as something that relieves us from accusations that we are exonerated from, but actually the alternative definition for the word exoneration, which means to be excused from tasks or obligations. So the Jeopardy tool helps us pull on willpower. Even though we want to be exonerated, we don't want to have to do constant maintenance in our life necessarily. It gives us the capacity to pull on willpower to keep going and do the maintenance we need to do in order to make the changes in our lives sustainable.
I have struggled with this in my life a lot. The idea of constant maintenance, constant work. It's something that I'm just like, I don't want to have to keep doing this. I want to do it one, done, set, forget, move on to something more creative, more exciting. And you're telling me I've got to go and I've got to attune, like this is like self-talk, right? I'm like, I've got to attune to these elements of my life, this personal growth. I've got to keep pushing through the difficulty, the pain. I got to keep scaling. I got to keep growing. This is exhausting. It's like doing dishes and they get dirty again next meal, and I do them, they get dirty again. I feel like that's in my personal growth life. It's hard, and it takes willpower. This idea of willpower, generating a discipline, an attunement to doing what's needed to be done on a long enough timeline. At the time of this recording, I'm trying to get physically in shape. It is so hard just to start doing this. Like, I've been 2 weeks now. Me and my son are working out together every day, and it is really hard to stay with it. I want to just like get to a moment. I'm like hoping like in 6 months I can get to a moment that I'll be in a fit state. I have my body where I want it. And then I go, okay, great. I'm done with that. I can coast. And I'm realizing one of the reasons why I haven't started in a personal growth way around my health is because I know it's ongoing forever. I know that if I lift weights and I get myself in shape and I eat healthy, that's a lifestyle change that I have to maintain indefinitely for the long haul. And so I've had fits and starts starting it because I don't want to commit like that. It's really hard to generate that willpower to stick with it. And there's been other areas in my life I haven't had that challenge. That's the one area that my physical health has been one that's just, I struggle with a lot. The fits and the starts, going and stopping, because I know just how long-term it is. That's a real challenge for me. So you probably have one of these in your life where you even know what you're supposed to do, right? You kind of have an idea, I should be doing this. And yet you know that once you start, you have to maintain it over the long haul. And that can maybe stop you from starting in the first place. So this tool of Jeopardy can help you with that. And there's basically 2 cues of when to use this or when to access this tool. The first one is when you need to have that longevity, that stick-to-itness, especially if you've gotten some success. You've already started something, maybe personal growth projects, maybe you've leveled up in a way, and you feel almost like, okay, I can start to coast. I can let go of some of the things I've been doing in my life and that I've had in place. I just want to relax a little bit. I don't want to have to keep pushing so hard. Well, this tool of Jeopardy can remind you that it takes constant and consistent pressure, constant and consistent discipline over the long haul to continue to get the results you've been getting up till now. So the stick-to-itness is one cue to use this. The second one is when you get to a place of demoralization, almost that Richard Branson moment when you feel like you're going to give up. Oh man, it's over. And then all of a sudden something triggers in you, a spark, and you go, I can't give up yet. I'm still alive. I still have life to me. And this tool of Jeopardy, I believe, can be useful in that moment as well. So I'm going to read the tool from the book. Again, this is without the entire context of the chapter and the book and the frameworks they bring. So I recommend you get the book to get all the context, but let's go ahead and I'll read this directly. Jeopardy. Imagine you can see far into the future. See yourself lying on your deathbed. This older self knows how crucial this present moment is because he's run out of them. You see him rouse himself from his bed and scream at you not to waste the present moment. You feel a deep, hidden fear that you've been squandering your life. This creates an urgent pressure to use, right now, the basic tool you selected above.
And when they say tool you selected above, they're talking about one of the previous 4 tools that you might be having some challenge implementing. So what is the benefit of fast forwarding in your mind and visualizing yourself on your deathbed, screaming at you to not waste the time that you have? Well, the reason why this tool is called Jeopardy is because we have a tendency to get real clear on our purpose and get real motivated when we have a deadline looming. It can be a deadline of exams at school. It can be a deadline at work. It can be a deadline of somebody being really super unhappy with you in your personal life if you don't get something done. Whatever it is, whenever we have a deadline looming in front of us, we always get real clear and we get into action. We don't resent that we have to do that work. I mean, maybe we do a little bit, but we don't really spend that much time resenting it because we know that we have to get this thing done. And it's usually because something is at jeopardy. Whatever it is, whether it's a business opportunity or it's grades or it's a relationship, something is on the line. And if we don't get it done, we value that thing more than we value being able to begrudge the work in front of us. So again, it's a matter of finding a more powerful replacement for whatever is going on for you right now. If what's going on for you right now is a sense of resentment that life requires constant maintenance, or if it's a frustration that you can't find a one and done solution to whatever it is that's going on for you, if it's just a desire to kick back and let life just be a little bit more, more chill, whatever that is, the thing that replaces that desire to find a low set point in homeostasis has to be strong enough to pull you out of that desire. And what Jeopardy does is it reminds you that of all the things you have control over, which is actually pretty low, actually, the one thing you never have control over is time. Time is something that will continue to move forward regardless of how you're using or spending it. It's really indifferent to whatever your struggles are. Time is just its own entity that keeps going. And Jeopardy is your future self reminding you how quickly time passes. How what you have on the line here, what's actually at jeopardy, is the one thing you can't get back. There's a deadline looming in front of you. It's a literal deadline. It's called death. That's the thing that's looming in front of you. And you only have so much time to fill between now and then. Now, that's not a reason to get anxious, right? We already went over tools that encourage you to remove anxiety from your life, remove this idea that you can control things, remove this feeling like you've got to be vigilant all the time. Clearly, this is not something that's intended to backslide you into a place that you've already overcome or transcended. This is more about gaining some perspective. This is more about finding the willpower or the spark to keep going when you kind of don't wanna, right? You maybe made changes in your life, you've implemented some of these tools or maybe other tools that are personal growth oriented, and that's the work you did, right? It should be done. You should have closed up shop. Why do you have to keep going? This reminds you that if you don't do the maintenance, then time will slip through your fingers. And eventually you won't have the capacity to go back and implement these changes in a more tenable way, in a more sustainable way, in order to keep the positive results you're getting and maintain those over the long term.
I'm glad you mentioned this idea of clarity, because I think that we're couching this in a you've arrived or you've gotten some success in your life and you want to take off the gas pedal and you want to take a break, set it, forget it, one and done. And this idea of maintenance comes up. And also, I would say this Jeopardy idea can be applied toward focus and attention in the efforts you're giving to life too. Like you listening to this podcast are probably a hard worker. You probably apply yourself toward personal growth. You use personality psychology and typology to understand more about yourself so you can grow. That's mostly where you're coming from, would be my guess, because you're listening to our podcast. That's how we talk about it. And there's ultimately a theme for your life, something that you're here to bring to the world. And media and culture and your friends and your family and society at large puts a lot of pressure on you to play their games and put a lot of effort into playing their games. And you might be seduced by this. You might say, oh, the goal of my life is to play into the current cultural movement of the moment, or the thing everybody's angry about, or the political cycle that's out here. And I don't care when you're listening to this, at the time of this recording, or well into the future, because those things are going to be different 10 years from now when you listen back. It doesn't really matter what it is. When you get to the end of your life on your deathbed, you are the only one that's going to have a measuring stick for your life. All the people that told you what to think, believe, and do now, they're not going to be anywhere near you. They're going to be gone. They're going to be in your past. They're not going to sit there with a measuring stick or a check mark, like a bunch of check boxes and go down the list and check off all the things you did that were right or attuned well. You have to determine that. So thinking into the future with this idea of Jeopardy and putting yourself there and looking back on your life, you might be in a lot of action right now. You may not be letting your gas pedal off at all. You might be doubling down on it. But is it the right thing to do? Are you attuned to the things that are actually going to be the things that you want to theme your life ultimately? And I think that's something that helps me with this exercise, this tool. It focuses me and goes, okay, I'm getting ready to make this post on social media because I read this thing in the media that made me angry and frustrated. I'm going to speak my mind. And I go, wait a second. In the grand scheme of my life, is this what I want to put attention to? Is this the action that I want to take? Does this add into how I measure my life at the end? And I think Jeopardy can help with this a lot.
Yeah, where do I want to put my energy? What are the kinds of things? If life is about maintenance, what do I want to be maintaining? Where do I want to place my energy and ensure that I'm taking the right actions?
Yeah, these are like noble distractions. I see them. No one would ever call you on them, and they usually fit into culture, and culture will give you tons of reward for it. But is it really what you're about? Is it really the thing you're here to bring to the world?
Sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes it's no, and only you can know that as an individual. There's a quote in the book, in that chapter around Jeopardy, that I thought was fantastic, which came from Samuel Johnson. And the quote is, "When a man knows he's to be hanged in a fortnight, it concentrates his mind wonderfully." So if you keep this idea that time doesn't go on forever, and it's hard for us to reconcile this, by the way. Like, if we really, truly had perspective on how little time we spend on the planet, it would freak us out. I don't think we could sustain it. And that's why every once in a while, like, I don't know about you, but every once in a while, my mortality hits me. And I realize I'm going to die. And this is an incredibly fast ride. And I get really freaked out. And then it kind of goes away. And I'm really grateful that it does, because if I was in that state all the time, it would not be okay. Like, it would just be a really agitated state. It's the feeling I'm sure that animals feel right before they're eaten by a predator. Like, it's that moment of like, oh God, I'm going to die. And then it goes back to normal life. And those two are very polarized feelings. The feeling of, oh God, I'm going to die. And the feeling of, oh, I guess this is Tuesday, right? I'm just doing Tuesday things. There's a balance in between those two things, which is keeping your finger on the pulse that eventually the ride does end. You don't have to freak yourself out about it. It doesn't have to be an all-consuming thought. It doesn't have to be something you feel anxious around. But it is true. It is going to happen. And some argue that that's part of what makes life special and each moment special. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I think that that's a useful belief. Then combining that with our tendency to wipe our minds of that thought completely because it's so overwhelming and we can't sustain that thought for long, us going all the way to the other side, which is something inside me tells me I'm going to live forever, or at least I don't have to think about time. Those two polarities are things that neither of those positions particularly serve you. So having your finger on the pulse of it, recognizing that it is true, realizing that there are a lot of things we can do today that give gifts to our future self. And one of those gifts is by understanding maintenance is woven into the system. There is nothing we can do and set it and forget it. We must maintain everything, just like Joel was talking about the human body. In order to have it be the form you want it to be, you have to maintain it. It's not something where you can get super built or buff and go, cool, I'm glad I did that, and then completely ignore it and have it just sustain itself. That said, one of the nice things about keeping in mind that life has maintenance and that the ride ends is that there is a certain sort of, it's like a letting go of trying to control every tiny little thing, knowing that at the end of all things, something major is completely out of your control. And then there's only so much time in this life to experiment and to live big and to find your greatest potential. There's only so much time to do that. And if you're willing to put the work into it, if you're willing to have the willpower, there's a freedom that comes along with this. So I think one of the nice things about the Jeopardy exercise or tool and the higher force of willpower, or that spark that keeps you going, there are some really nice advantages. One of them is that you have the courage to start new ventures. You have a boldness about you that's willing to start something new. Like you said, Joel, you're going to start working on your body because you've made peace with two things. You've made peace that if you let it go too long, right, eventually you won't have the opportunity at all. So if you want a body that looks a certain way or behaves a certain way or feels a certain way, you're going to have to start now. And you have made peace with the idea that you're going to have to make it a lifestyle change. Like it's going to have to be maintenance. So you're willing to start this venture. And that's what that's what Jeopardy does, is it gives you the power to start new ventures, to take on new things that you know are going to be work, but you only have a certain amount of time to do them. So I think that's one of the major advantages. Another one is that it gives you the ability to focus and concentrate in time periods or places where you otherwise might be challenged to concentrate. Like I think a lot of people, particularly certain personality types, complain about indecisiveness, that they never know quite what the right decision to make is, and they end up waffling for a long time. One of the things that Jeopardy does is it reminds you that you have a limited limited amount of time to make these decisions. And sometimes not making a decision is making a decision. And so it gives you the ability to focus and concentrate, like that Samuel Johnson quote, right? If you know you're going to die in 14 days or whatever a fortnight is, it gives you extraordinary concentration of mind. And then I think that third thing that it really helps is it helps actually remove controlling an addictive behavior. If you remind yourself that you only have a certain amount of time, then you don't try to control all the little things, right? Like all the little tiny minutia of life suddenly gets put into perspective. You don't want to control all that stuff because you only have so much energy and so much time. And so you get better at allocating it. And that includes addictive behaviors. You don't want to pour that amount of time into something that is controlling you, right? Controlling behaviors are you trying to control other things. Addictions are something else controlling you. And it severs both of those kinds of dynamics because you want to pour all of that into something that's a little bit more appreciative, a little bit more present, a little bit more here and now, and pouring into your life that, again, gives your future self gifts of having your past self pour into your future self's well-being.
So the tool is called Jeopardy, tapping into the higher force of willpower. It's from the book The Tools from Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels. You can pick it up. In fact, I recommend you pick up this book. It's a fantastic book. It's got a lot more than what we just talked about in these last 5 episodes unpacked in there. It's a very dense book, a lot of practical, along with kind of philosophical viewpoints on how these things work and the energies you align yourself with when you do these exercises, which I think is really critical.
There's very few books that I would say have an economy of thoughts and concepts. Most, particularly personal development books, have a lot of extra stuff in them, like filler. One of the things I really appreciate about the tools is there's very little filler. Even the stories that they choose in the book are almost perfect demonstrations of the points that they're talking about. So I admire the book. I don't agree with absolutely every tiny little point in it, but I would say I agree with so much of it that I would highly recommend. And again, it's only because I tend more towards the skeptical agnostic, and there's a little bit of a spiritual tone in all of it. But I have no problem with that. I'm okay with buying into a spiritual tone if it's a helpful belief.
Hey, to make you NTs feel better, they quote Nietzsche and put him all through like one of the chapters. So I know you NTs like that guy.
Well, I don't know if all NTs do. But that said, even if there is a little bit more of a spiritual tone that I'm personally bought into, I would say that how they present it and the concepts and thoughts that they present are high quality enough so that it's okay to suspend a little disbelief. And again, there's an economy of concept in there where they really pack it. I mean, it's actually not that long of a book, and every single chapter has so much to offer. So I strongly recommend this book. Clearly, we did a 5-part series on it, so we're both fans. And again, it's helped us get through some pretty tough times and some challenging situations. So go check it out.
Yeah, and you've been listening along. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What's coming up for you? Come over to personalityhacker.com. Directly below this episode, leave a question, a comment, or share your story about your experience, maybe with these tools. Maybe you've had access to this book before. You've done some of these exercises or ones similar to this. What's the feedback? What happened in your life? What shifted? What's coming up for you as you listen along? We want to hear from you.
Thank you so much for being a part of this 5-part series. And if you enjoyed this podcast series, and if you just enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave us a rating and review on iTunes, that helps us out a lot. And a review. Write some words and a review. Also, we have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. It's available at all major retailers, book retailers. And if you leave a rating and review on Amazon and Goodreads, that also helps us out a lot. Plus, this is an ad-free podcast. I'm not sure if you noticed. And part of how we subsidize the podcast is by offering amazing personal growth products and programs. So go to personalityhacker.com. Under the catalog, there are a suite of products that are personal growth oriented, using personality type as a lens to make sure it is tailor made for you. So if you are interested in investing yourself and taking this a little further, go check it out.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.